dark side. Light this bitch up.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. So, sometimes when you see a person who has a public image that leans a certain direction, and then the next time you see him, it leans in a very different direction, most of the time I think of one of two things. Either I think of a Machiavellian PR maneuver, often trying to repair like a damaged image. Those are not the good kind, but sometimes it is a very genuine pivot, and it is an indication that the person that you're dealing with is a genuine salt of the earth person. And I honestly feel that the guest that we have today fits in that latter category. And his name is Charles Adler. Charles, how are you, buddy?
Not bad. Not bad. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How apt was my description of you in the intro? Because I don't want to belabor the point, but I haven't had the opportunity to speak to you before. And I think, if I may paraphrase something that you said years and years and years ago, that, or maybe it was said about you, I don't want to make that mistake, that you were the closest thing that Canada had to a voice like Rush Limbaugh. And now you are decidedly different. And I'm just kind of curious about the chronology of how you went from one to the other.
Well, that's pretty simple, actually. Rush Limbaugh was my warm-up act in hundreds of stations in the United States.
Oh, wow.
So I was listening to a little bit of Rush on the way to my show. And I'm positive, because, and I don't mean to compare this to COVID or anything like that, but I'm positive that if you're hanging with somebody, you end up picking up some of their habits. I have a feeling that some people, thought tonally, and who knows, I can't be objective about myself, but they heard some Limbaugh there. And I think the other people who are talking about that are probably talking about the right of center thing. I don't think I was ever as right of center as Limbaugh, because Limbaugh drilled down on all the social / moral stuff, anti-abortion, anti-gay rights, a lot of sort of semi-religious stuff, which I didn't do. But I just think, I think most of it was the tone, James, to be brutally honest with you. And I think in recent years, with social media and the thing we had with Kenny, the flame out we had with Jason Kenney, I think that people had decided that I had made this massive conversion. I mean, in my brain, in my heart, I just think of myself as a mushy, moderate conservative, I guess. I became PC when I'm not politically correct, but progressive conservative when I moved to Ontario a long time ago, back in the late 70s, and I had voted Liberal before that because Pierre Trudeau was my MP, the riding that I grew up in Mount Royal. And so I moved to Toronto, Hamilton, bunch of places in Southern Ontario, and provincially, I just the party that I connected with, both in terms of their policies and just personally, culturally, friends of mine were the Bill Davis PCs. And one time, I guess I voted for Lincoln Alexander. He was in Hamilton. I was living in an apartment building. I wasn't paying all that much attention to politics. Actually, I was a rock and roll DJ. I was called the Matinee Idol, doing rock and roll on AM Top 40 and stuff.
Was that CHEX?
It was called CJJD at the time. It was named after Keith Dancy's wife, but it was basically CHAM, same signal, Cham. I worked for them for I guess a couple of years, and so I'm just living in Hamilton, and I wasn't even thinking about the election at all. I'm not saying I wasn't somewhat aware that there was a provincial election, but I really wasn't paying attention. And I walk out my door, and there's a polling box. And I guess I was registered, or I registered. I don't know what it was, but there was a polling box there, and I had to mark an X, and I marked it. I marked it for the first name on the ballot, which was Alexander.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd love to tell you there was some sophisticated plan going on that I was interested in a lot of political philosophy about. But I was a kid. I was 20, 22 or something like that at the time, and I was busy doing a lot of things with rock and roll and beer and dating and whatever a 22-year-old rock and roll DJ is into. Politics isn't even on the top 100, and the only reason I probably voted that day is because I physically bumped into the ballot box.
That's why a lot of people do drugs, because the access. It was right there.
It was the democracy was there, man. I
right.
had to have a
take
sip.
a hit. That's right.
Yeah.
Is it hard to escape the brand of the network you work for? Like, you worked for Sun News, and if you were always sort of a mushy middle kind of guy, or a centrist or a moderate or whatever, is it difficult? And did you find it difficult at the time that you worked there to separate yourself from a decidedly far right brand?
Yeah, they stuff a lot of right wing stuff on the prompter.
Just Ezra Levant's face.
Whatever. They just stuff it in there, and I can talk about it now because it's been a long time, and Corey Tonick has other things to do, and he's doing very, very well. But they stuff a lot of stuff on the prompter, and fortunately for me, and I guess my brand, I can ad lib. I mean, I can ad lib your ass off for hours. I don't need a script. They used to, when I was reading news many years ago, people thought that our team was crazy when they would tell their friends that Adler goes in half the time with no script. But that's just the way I am. I mean, I got this from my mom. I'm a natural born Hungarian storyteller. And so very often when they'd stuff all the sort of hard right wing cliches into the prompter, I would just go off and just do my own thing. But the guests are the guests, and the guests were definitely right wing, and the rest of the network, certainly in prime time, was really, really right wing. I'll always be convinced that they only wanted me.
Like, you're the token centrist or something?
Yeah, token. I was a token because they were applying for a must carry, whatever the official term is for getting the kind of license that CBC and CTV had, and they wanted the CRTC to treat us the same way. But anyway, they I guess took over my Facebook page, and they posted a lot of stuff. They created a Facebook page at Charles Adler's Sun News Facebook page, and it
using a lot more exclamation points than you would ever use.
Yeah. They just the thing is, James, I was so busy doing so many other things. I had the radio show, I had this Sun show, I had writing to do. I had a bit of a social life. So the Sun News thing was kind of a side hustle, and I had no idea that they would want to push me to the right like that, because I mean, they weren't pushing me to the right like that in the United States, and they certainly weren't pushing me to the right on the radio show. I was a somewhat right of center mainstream guy, and once again, the only reason on radio I was perceived as sort of radically right or hard right or whatever the terms were was because of the tone. I tend to get excited.
You have one of those great voices. Yeah, like there's a few guys in our country that have like voices that are just very, like, oh, I know who that is immediately. And you're definitely one of them. Like, you're a true. You're kind of like in the best way possible. Like, you're like that throwback radio voice, right? And
I'm a throwback. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was born with this. I was like this when I was 8, 9 years old. I mean, I was very short when I was 8 or 9. I'm not that tall now, but I used to love being on city buses, saying something really filthy to a woman. When I was 8, 9, and I only did that when there was a man next to her. She always assumed that it was the man next to her that had said this filthy thing, and because I had a grown-up voice.
Baritone down to like a 60-year-old man's. That is hilarious.
I always thought it was a freak. Still am by some people.
So I've heard you talk about you mentioned Jason Kenney, and I heard you talk about him before, and I know that you've sort of weighed in, and I don't know if you want to call it support, but you're saying you think people should vote for Notley, and I'm just curious, what was it that like he almost, I don't want to say he broke your heart, but like it feels like you were all in with Jason Kenney, and then the bottom fell out. Why were you all in to begin with, and how did the bottom fall out?
I thought Jason Kenney was whip smart. I still think he is. I thought he did a lot of homework. I still think he does. I still think he knows, policy backwards and forwards better than anyone. I've never met anyone who outworked him. work ethic was kind of my real religion as I was growing up at the feet of my father, who I don't think ever worked less than an 80-hour week, and my mom did several jobs. I mean, we weren't blue collar because we had a family business, but it was a one man show, and it was my dad hunched over the sewing machine all day when he wasn't talking to his customers who were coming in to get their pants tightened or expanded, shirt, skirts lifted, lowered, whatever it is people wanted for their clothes. And of course, there was a dry cleaning piece of the business as well. And I would do all sorts of chores around the store. Anyway, I grew up in a very, I guess, to put it nicely, working class family. I'd rather say working class than poor. We didn't feel poor. We were happy to be in Canada. We were Hungarian refugees and all of that. Look, the Jason Kenney piece was mostly about me admiring that strong work ethic of his. There are aspects of Jason Kenney I just didn't pay attention to. Now, maybe I chose not to pay attention. I wasn't paying attention to a lot of the homophobia that he was doing at fundraisers. I didn't see any of that. I didn't get that sense until the actual campaign, when I saw some video of what Jason had been up to in San Francisco earlier, and then some other tape of what he had done and what he had said in Alberta.
Is that from years and years ago, or
so
recent?
Once I saw that, it became very difficult for me to see him the same way again. And we had that clash, and I guess 4 years ago. It was exactly 4 years ago, as a matter of fact. And because we had that clash, I was now perceived as, I don't know, some sort of wild-eyed socialist or something, an NDPer. I used the term knuckle draggers. I was referring specifically to people who were hardcore anti-abortion, hardcore anti-gay, hardcore anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, all of that. I was referring to them as the knuckle draggers when I asked Jason Kenney, why is it that these knuckle draggers are attracted to you? And then he and his people did a bunch of social media around the knuckle dragger thing, portraying me as someone who had turned on all Albertans. I was calling my salt of the earth, Alberta, the listeners, knuckle draggers. That's what they were saying over and over again, kind of the big lie. And then that was the beginning of, I guess, the transformation of the brand. It's very hard for one person to fight the waves and waves of media coming at you.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of these people who goes on the air and says, I'm not this and I'm not that. I don't play defense. I play offense.
As a friend of mine tells me often, it's really difficult to control your own reputation, especially in media in Canada. Would you agree with that? Did you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just saying that a friend of mine often tells me that it's difficult to control your own reputation, especially in with the media in Canada. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, other people will characterize you, and you can't do very much about that. As I say, I'm just not one of these people who says, no, I'm this, no, I'm a conservative, no, they're lying about. Yeah, that's whiny. I can't stand it when I hear people do that, and I don't want to hear myself do that. Popeye the Sailor Man. I am what I am.
Yeah. I feel like I am what they say I am sometimes, but that comes with the territory too. Are you in tune, or do you sort of recognize what I recognize, especially when, let's stick with Alberta politics for a second, that no matter who ends up in the premier seat, on the conservative side, especially the UCP side, that there is a machine behind the scenes that they almost are beholden to.
Yeah.
And I feel like people like Jason Kenney, because Nathan Jacobson, who's a friend of mine, and I talk to him about Jason Kenney sometimes as well, because he feels the same way that you feel. He admired his work ethic, and he thinks he's really smart and all that. But then when he got into the premier's chair, he said that he was basically taking marching orders or compelled to do what the machine was telling him to do, and his advisors. Is that something that you agree with? Is there do we have a problem in this country about the way strategists and operatives sort of make their leaders act and behave?
Yeah, I think with Jason, that's bullshit. And so here I am. On the one hand, people perceive me as being some sort of enemy of Kenny. I don't feel like anybody's enemy, but that's bullshit because I've been in the room with Jason Kenney when there are other people in the room. Nobody tells Jason Kenney what to do and how to do it. That's nonsense. He's generally the smartest guy in the room, and he's very, very aware that he's the smartest guy in the room. So I don't buy into that. Are there different factions in the United Conservative Party that he wants to appease or wanted to appease? Absolutely. But the idea that there are some, evil brain trust people in the room turning Jason Kenney into their puppet that they're pulling his strings. Sorry, I've been around too many politicians, Jason Kenney and many others, and that's always, some people will say that about Trudeau and others will say that about Jason Kenney. It's a popular myth out there that these politicians, whether they're liberal, conservative, NDP, whatever, are just always taking marching orders from someone. I mean, the UCP is pushing that right now, that Notley takes her marching orders. I'm sorry, Trudeau. I can't even say this with a straight face. That Notley is taking her marching orders from Jagmeet Singh. I mean, seriously, that's what they do, because they found this constitution. It's not the Canadian Constitution, the NDP Constitution. And so the NDP, the federal NDP, and all of the provincial NDPers are kind of one happy, socialist family. Okay, so it's in the Constitution. However, there's this other word that I guess the UCP doesn't want to look at. It's called autonomous. Now, autonomous generally means you're on your own, bud. You've got your own choices to make, which, of course, different provinces do. So if you had told, I'll date myself here. If you had told Roy Romano years ago, who was a very, very powerful NDPer, and he was the premier of Saskatchewan for a number of years, if you had told him then that he was taking his orders from the federal NDP leader, he might just hoof you right in the jewels. Gary Doer, I didn't vote for Gary Doer, but I thought of Gary Doer as a friend. I used to chat with him regularly. They wouldn't let him on my radio show because apparently he didn't sound large enough when he was on with me, and he did other shows, and that's fine, and worked for him. But Gary Doer, I thought of as a friend, and he was the NDP leader in Manitoba. And if someone had told Gary Doer that he was taking his cues or his direction from, I guess it would have been Alexa McDonough and Jack Layton federally, well, I mean, and it's not that Gary disliked Alexa or Jack. That's not the point. But Jack and Alexa weren't, pulling his strings. That's nonsense.
That is it's a pretty stunningly superficial idea that all of the federal and provincial parties of the same colors are all in cahoots all the time. Like, that is just not true. First of all, their politics are completely fluid at the provincial level because they're dealing with a set of political theater aspects that they're not dealing with at the federal level. So sometimes, you're even on the opposite side of, an issue that might overlap provincially. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Do you think the political acumen of the everyday Canadian has increased or dropped in the last, say, 5 years?
I don't think it's dropped. I just think that we're in an age, whether it's the States, Canada, Britain, whatever part of it is, the social media part of it is, some mainstream media people embarrassing themselves. Part of it is much of mainstream media being downsized. Much of it is just people being bored with mainstream media, looking elsewhere for stimulation. And so it's not that the acumen has come down. It's just there's a lot of people out there, believing a lot of crap. I mean, how else do I put it? I mean, I just mentioned the Alberta UCP pushing this idea that Notley's taking orders from Jagmeet Singh. You've got Pierre Poilievre saying that Justin Trudeau's taking his orders from Jagmeet Singh. Yeah, they did a deal, and Jagmeet Singh got his dental care. Yeah. And got a couple of other things, and that's the deal. But the idea that Jagmeet Singh is, on the horn to Trudeau every day, telling him what to say, how to say it. I mean, that's the impression you would get from the Poilievre Conservatives, and that's crazy. And I'm not suggesting that Trudeau doesn't respect Jagmeet Singh, and that's not the point. But Trudeau is very much large and in charge, whether you like it or not. He is the prime minister. The PMO is the most powerful institution in the country. And the federal NDP doesn't come close.
We are living in an age where scandal is easy to find, and there is a. I'm not like a person who gets really ragey and angry at quote unquote cancel culture, but it exists. The terminology might bother people, but there are certain circumstances where it exists. Is our prime minister a Teflon prime minister? Because I don't know if I could name another politician who could withstand some of the things that he's had to withstand, including the blackface photos. And I know people get really upset when people bring that up, but just as a point of history, when people look back at the age that we're living in, and that there was a progressive prime minister that, where that scandal came out, and he survived it. What does that say about his leadership? What does that say about the media and maybe their tendency to not hit as hard against certain people as they would against others?
Doesn't say anything about the media. Justin Trudeau's a rock star, and rock stars there's a different standard there, and he's a rock star. Now, people are listening and watching this in different parts of the country, so they may be watching on the prairie, where I live. I don't live here all the time, but I live here much of the time. And on the prairie,
they will love
it's
that
hard.
That you said rock star, Charles. I'm pretty sure.
Well, it's just hard. It's just Winnipeg is a rock town, but Justin Trudeau is not a rock star in much of Winnipeg, and certainly not much of Manitoba, or not too many acres in Saskatchewan or Alberta is Justin Trudeau necessarily seen as a rock star. But boy, is he ever a rock star in the places that matter. And this is what frustrates a lot of conservatives, especially conservatives on the prairie, that they don't have people in their lives who have anything but nasty and negative things to say about Justin Trudeau. So it's hard for them to embrace the idea or even tolerate the idea that he's a rock star in many of the places with dense populations. And, best example would be 905. Years ago when I was living in Ontario, and I had, 3 or 4 different jobs, and 2 or 3 different names. And, I'd be traveling all the time. I didn't sleep very much. I know every inch of 905, every inch of it. And the idea that the people who I know in 905 are going to be devouring Pierre Poilievre's conspiracy theories. I'm sorry. As we said in the States, I worked in the States for a number of years. That dog don't hunt.
Yeah.
That dog don't hunt.
There is an interesting timing that took place with the conservative leadership for the federal Conservatives, where it felt like just at the time, like they kind of, I guess they felt they were going moderate with Scheer and moderate with O'Toole, and they probably kind of were. And then at the one time that they should go moderate, which would be the time that overlaps with the rest of the country's fatigue of a government that's been in there for a decade, that's when they go batshit and go to Pierre Poilievre. And I'm just sitting here thinking, like, I'm trying to unpack this, and I'm trying to think ahead to the next election. And it was, and you know the way we are in Canada, we often don't vote for the incoming government. We vote against the outgoing government. And this time, a lot of us are like, well, wait a second. The outgoing government has a leader who may be a rock star to some people, and that may drive us nuts. But look at the opposition leader. How are we going to plug our noses and vote for that? Nothing but a low voter turnout can win this election for Poilievre, I don't think. Do you think that the Conservatives, who always do the conservative two-step where they go extreme during leadership nominations and then moderate during the general, do you think that's over?
Look, if you're running against a Trudeau, rock star or not, he's been in there for a while. People tend to want to change horses after a while. So if you're running against someone like that, you want to be moderate, because you don't want to give anyone a reason to not vote against Trudeau. I mean, this is really simple math, actually. If they had got, just to use O'Toole as an example, if O'Toole was there right now, they would have a much better chance of beating Trudeau.
100%.
If they had picked Peter MacKay, they'd have a much better chance of it. Because if you've got, most elections are, as they say, referenda on the government. So in a normal situation, the next election would be a referendum on Trudeau. And there's a very good chance that he would lose a referendum election. But this may be a choice election where people have a choice to make, either Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre. And once again, in many of the places with dense populations that are up for grabs, and whether it's the suburbs of BC that I've lived in, suburbs of Vancouver, whether it's 905 that I've lived in, and whether it's the suburbs of Montreal, which is kind of where I grew up. In none of those places is a guy like Pierre Poilievre popular. But if it was an Aaron O'Toole, it'd be a different situation because it wouldn't matter. He doesn't stick out. He doesn't give you a reason to wait a second, I don't even have the right language for it. I'm not saying that people are frightened to death of Pierre Poilievre. I guess the nicest way I could put it is turned off. Whereas, like I say, a Peter MacKay or Aaron O'Toole, they're so generic that there's no reason at all why people say, well, I don't want Trudeau, but I can't vote for Aaron O'Toole. That's very difficult. Some of the things that politicians I don't think pay attention to is how they come across visually, because people instinctively go, do I want this face on my TV screen or computer screen for the next 4 years or the next 8 years? And Pierre Poilievre does, it's not him, but I guess the digital team he has around him, they constantly want to do these close-ups of him, where he looks like a stalker.
I have
that
one.
Creepy thing.
I have a file photo of Pierre Poilievre.
Okay.
And it's really, do you want to see that every time?
That's a somewhat different Poilievre, but I take your point.
Yeah. It's Millhouse for all the ones listening and not watching.
So in any case, they do these close-ups of him that make him look extremely creepy. And the average person, as I say, regardless how they feel about Trudeau, the average person, this is not even conscious. It's almost, it's just a subconscious thing. They look at that and they just say, I don't want to see that in my face for the next 8 years. And as smart TV producers understand, people listen with their eyes. Okay. Yeah. So if their eyes are caught up on something on the screen they don't like, that's all they're listening to. They're listening to ugly. They're listening to foul. They're listening to creepy. They're listening to pervy. That's what they're listening. So they're not hearing any of his words. So he's so proud of these soliloquies that he puts out on Justin Trudeau and how capitalism is supposed to work and how freedom is supposed to work, and he goes on with this completely insincere stuff about people at food banks as if he gives a shit about people at food banks. But anyway, he goes on, but a lot of people don't hear any of that anyway, because he's creeping them out. I just don't think that they understand, because what they do understand, what they do absolutely love, is the stuff they're doing gets clicks, and they are click crazy, and it also gets donations.
Yeah.
So as long as the Conservative fund is replenished every minute when that stuff is on, they can convince themselves that this is a real winner. But I'll tell you, those people I'm talking about in the suburbs of Montreal and the suburbs of Vancouver at 905, they don't give a rip about the Conservative Party of Canada fund.
No, they don't, and there's a good reason for that. The Conservatives fundraise off of every single scandal. When that CBC thing happened with Pierre Poilievre and Elon Musk sort of piling up on CBC and the Trudeau government and the government-funded media, I understand all the factual errors that was made, but there were people that I consider to be to have a high political acumen, thinking that, this is really going to hurt Poilievre. And I was just like, how is this going to hurt his base? If he says something bad about the CBC, it doesn't really matter to his base if it's true or not, does it?
No, it doesn't. But what they, and this is once again, I don't think they understand. I mean, maybe they do. Maybe I shouldn't say understand, but they're constantly attacking institutions. What they don't, I have to say, what they don't get about Canada, okay, especially Canadians who are of this generation, so-called new Canadians, or the sons and daughters of new Canadians, recent Canadians. What they don't get is those people honestly believe that you need these institutions that are traditional Canadian institutions to keep Canada together. So when you're attacking the central bank, right, you're pretending that the Bank of Canada is the enemy of the working Canadian. That doesn't fly. And when you're pretending that the CBC is the enemy, That too doesn't do very well. Now, it really doesn't do well in Quebec, where the CBC, known as Radio Canada, is a cultural icon. They might as well call it Radio Quebec. It is an instrument of Quebec nationalism. And anybody who's in the conservative movement, liberal movement, whatever, the bowel movement, anybody ought to understand that attacking Quebec nationalism, attacking the core of Quebecois culture, Radio Canada, which is a platform for all of these cultural icons in Quebec, for a conservative to attack the core of the Quebecois culture is, I have to say it, stupid. Yeah. Very stupid.
They often give up on Quebec, though. I mean, they what did they, one seat, for a few elections in a row. There was not much action going on in Quebec for the Conservatives. But they often, I think they have, they have the short game that they have in mind seems to be fundraising, right? Fundraising off all these tweets and mini scandals and fake scandals. But their long game appears to be, they'll forgive us by the time the election comes, right? Like,
the giving up on Quebec entirely is just poor math. You've got to drive toward a majority government. The moment you say Quebec doesn't matter, you're saying you're going to be a minority. And that's very dangerous for the Conservative Party of Canada, because if there's an election today and they get a minority, they've got a few more seats than the Liberals, but the Liberals and the NDP and the Bloc Québécois have more seats than they do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Conservatives may get a chance to be in government for a little while, have a throne speech, maybe a budget, but they're going to be defeated because the Bloc Québécois and the NDP and the Liberals are not interested in a Pierre Poilievre government. So, Brad Wall, my old buddy from Saskatchewan, the Premier of Saskatchewan, he's said it recently. Unless the Conservatives get a majority or something that is very, very close to a majority, they're going to have a lot of trouble sustaining themselves. Now, if a coalition, let's call it a coalition, informal coalition of the Bloc Québécois and the NDP and the Liberals defeat the Conservatives in their first few months, there's a good chance there wouldn't be an election. There's a good chance that the Governor General would just turn the keys over to Justin Trudeau again.
Let's shift gears a little bit here, because I want to talk about polarization and what it does to us and the way that we think. And I'm going to use an example issue that I think has been sort of swallowed by polarization, and it's an all or nothing game now between one side and the other. And that's, Bill C-11. I've seen, I get my information for Bill C-11 from people like Michael Geist, who is hardly a staunch conservative. I think he's a reputable man. I think he's very smart. And I think that his opinion on Bill C-11 makes a lot of sense to me. But it has become one of those issues, especially in Quebec and in certain parts of Ontario, where if you're seen criticizing it, they just lump you with Pierre Poilievre and with that kind of far-right thing. Do you think, and you don't have to use that issue as the example, but do you think that a lot of issues that could be debated in a robust manner get swallowed into that black hole of polarization?
Yeah, because when people offer examples of what they don't like about Bill C-11, some people listening to that think it's paranoid. And you think paranoid, you almost immediately think of Pierre Poilievre, because he comes across as paranoid all the time, or pandering to the paranoid. Fear and anger, paranoia. I mean, they're all cousins. They're all in the same trailer park, and that's what he does. So yeah, even a guy like Michael Geist, who is a very rational, very intelligent guy, he puts out his feelings about that. And then different DJs, talk show hosts, political candidates, the Conservative Party of Canada, they start quoting him and talking about it, and they start torquing it up. And it becomes, once again, something that feels paranoid. And I'll say this over and over again at the risk of, boring some of the audience to death. Canada is a moderate country. They're moderate in terms of what they want substantively, what they want in terms of policy. They want moderate rhetoric. They want moderate tone. And anyone who thinks that Pierre Poilievre's CPC, whether it's the digital faction or what they're doing in the House of Commons or what he's doing on those videos. Anyone who declares that their tone is moderate, I mean, you better Google the word moderate, because you're missing something. They are not moderate. They're not trying to be moderate, and that's just not the Canadian way in many parts of the densely populated country we call Canada.
Do you have thoughts on Bill C-11?
No,
No?
not. I don't have any. I haven't done a whole lot of
That serves me right for asking.
whole lot of thinking about it. So I don't mean to disappoint you. I tend not to get frightened of a lot of stuff about regulations, because I was living in a regulated environment all my life, all my adult life. I've been doing broadcasting, and so I said whatever I wanted to say. I did not get all dinged up. I didn't get punished. I didn't get put in the penalty box. Nobody put me in jail. So I tend not to get as frightened about Canadian regulators as some other people do. Does that mean I'm right? Does that mean I'm correct? No, I may be wrong. So C-11 may be the worst thing that's ever been. But I tend to think that the people who are railing about C-11 are torquing it up. I just don't see the regulators inside everybody's phone, inside everybody's computer, going after them, preventing people from being free. This is one of the freest countries in the world. And when people hit me with that, we're a dictatorship and Justin Trudeau is a dictator, I just go the other way. To me, it's just a bad neighborhood I don't want to live in.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm not a big fan of the type of reach that the CRTC has. And I also think that if we're going to progress as a country, we have to do a couple things simultaneously. I think instead of and I'm not talking about the money part, but the broadcasting standards that traditional radio and television have to abide by doesn't exist on the internet. And for some people, it feels like BC-11 might change that. And I think that if anything, it should kind of go the other way. I think TV and radio should be more like the internet, and the internet should be less like legacy.
Well, let me just challenge that, okay? Because I think this is an interesting conversation. Because when people would call in and say things like that, and the only way that for me to turn sort of raw meat into a burger that's edible is to ask for specifics. So I'm not trying to attack here. I'm just asking. Well, what is it? What is it that you're doing right now with yours truly? What is it that you're doing right now with me that will be different or would be different once C-11 gets royal assent? What would change?
Well, from my memory of Michael Geist's columns, and he's written so much about it that it all kind of becomes white noise sometimes, because I'm a layman guy. I don't really understand how the legislation would work when the processes are put in place. However, the user-generated content ambiguity, I feel like, might impact me. How searchable my show would be once the algorithm gets a hold of it versus something like a CTV or a Global. Like, will I shrink in noticeability? These are all unanswered questions. So my concern is mostly about how I don't know, more so than what I know is going to happen.
Okay.
I'm not sure, right? And so I think that's really my problem.
Yeah, I mean, I just need something specific. If I'm going to get into fear, if I'm going to get into borderline paranoia, if I'm going to get into rage, reason to make certain statements, write in certain columns, I just need, with all due respect, I just need more than that.
No, I'm with you, because I'm not part of the paranoid crew. I'm part of I'm very curious, and and the more I try to find out, and the critics, the worthwhile critics of Bill C-11, the main point that they seem to be making is that we don't know how this legislation will manifest. We don't know what the big tech companies are going to do when it comes to their content inside Canada. We don't know if an Australia situation is going to happen where Facebook might just be like, well, then we're out, and then force the government to do something about that. So it's more about the unknowns for me. And I'm not paranoid about it. I just really want to know, because I'm a growing content provider in the digital sphere.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if I grow to a certain level, if it's going to benefit me or not. And I just kind of want answers, right? So
yeah, my take on these things in general is, if it gets so egregious that the public says no, we can't take this anymore, the authorities will amend. And I'm sorry if that sounds really wimpy to people. If that sounds like I'm in the States, they'd say I'm part of the deep state, or here they would call me a
libtard or
toady for the government or a liberal.
Right.
I really don't care. I've been called, James. I've been called so many names. It's water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
But I just do not believe that any government, long term, they can make mistakes at the beginning with a policy, but long term, I don't believe that any government is in such a rigid position, feet in concrete, that they wouldn't make amendments, they wouldn't make changes if it was costing them. I think there's this thing out there in sort of media land that governments don't want to be reelected. They just want to follow some sort of ideological agenda. Anyone who thinks the Liberal Party is an ideological party is crazy. The Liberal Party has no ideology. The Liberal Party is about the relentless pursuit of power. And that means if the folks start going the other way, the Liberal Party will go the other way. Yeah. That's why the Liberal Party has been in the history of democracy, whether people like to hear this or not, one of the most successful organizations. Because it is not handcuffed by ideology. And one of the reasons I sometimes sound, like I'm a pro-liberal, I used to be thought of as a red Tory. The red Tories have disappeared. So one of the reasons I think people think of me as a red Tory or a liberal or whatever, once again, the mushy middle, is because I can't stand ideology. I don't like far left. I don't like far right. I don't like paranoia. I don't like authoritarianism. I don't like any of those things. And so I like Canada. I love this country, actually. I spent a number of years in the other country. I don't hate America. Americans were very good to me. But this is what I call home. And what I call home is a place where most governments, provincial and federal, regardless of what their stripe is, most of the time, no matter how many mistakes they make, most of the time end up agreeing with the plurality, if not majority, of people.
I agree with that. We have a few minutes left. I have a couple questions left. One of them that I want to ask, and I'm really curious what your take is on this, because, there is a... I don't even like saying certain phrases anymore, because it creates a search engine optimization type reaction out of people, where their brains hear a certain term and then they automatically point at you and say you're this or that. And one of those terms is free speech. Free speech was a bastion of the left forever. It was like, fought for on the campuses of places like Berkeley. It was, when hip hop music came out with dirty lyrics, it was all these like Republicans and Al Gore's wife, but mostly Republicans and religious groups that were trying to censor music. And 30 years go by, and that has completely flipped on its head, where now the right yell about free speech, and the left automatically, because it's coming from where it's coming from, will then speak against free speech instead of what I had Noam Chomsky on the other day. What he's told me several times before on the phone and in interviews is that the best battle against bad ideas is with good ideas. Where do you stand on that? And what do you think has happened to produce that flip?
I think free speech to the far right is the right to hate on people, hate on groups, hate on certain governments. So I think that people who are more progressive, more in the middle, see it as hate speech, which is what they're after. And am I for hate speech? Am I for hating on people, whether they're transgender, LGBT, the full rainbow of LGBT? That's what, especially the transgender piece. That's what they're getting clicks. That's what they're harvesting dollars on right now. You want to hate on Muslims, you want to hate on intellectuals, you want to hate on people who are smart. I don't. And so do I take the far right seriously when they say they're for free speech? Are you kidding me? They're not about free speech. They're about the right to hate as much as possible 24/7 on the groups that create a base and create dollars for them. It's a racket. It's a business. And so, no, I don't take it terribly seriously. I think I have free speech. I have free speech right now. Would I want to abuse this speech? by hating on the good people who are watching this, by hating on specific groups, whether they're religious groups, or sexual orientation, whatever. Do I want to do it? No, I don't. I don't want to do that, because you know what? I want to be on this show the same way I am in real life.
Yeah.
I don't do that in real life. I don't want to do that on this show. I think I can, make a decent living. People in the States and Canada over the years have been good to me without me engaging in all of that. Some of that business, by the way, about the hate is only about one thing, and it's not about free speech. It's about greed. There is a market out there for hate, and there are some hate hustlers. I don't have to name them for you, who just can't get enough of the filthy lucre, and it's greed that drives them, not some sort of valiant, noble cause about freeing the population and helping people to food banks. Give me a fucking break.
Yeah. Lastly, I want to just actually share a sentiment with you. I saw you on the Eager Beaver podcast. I think it was last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, and you said something right at the beginning that really stayed with me. And I've recently had a tough experience, and I'm climbing out of it right now, personal experience. And one of the things that I've been reminding myself is to try to be as thankful and grateful and positive as possible. What you said on that podcast, that and you've been in this business for about 4 decades, is that you still feel the warmth and goodness when someone contacts you and said, something you said today, Charles, made my day. And something you said made a relative think twice before they did this. When you said that, I honestly, I had a better rest of my day. I almost became that person that wanted to reach out to you and tell you that what you said on that podcast meant a lot to me. And I just want to know, how does a person who's been in this business as long as you have not become desensitized to those types of people that reach out to you?
Because they're worth more than money to me. Because I grew up with people who had been traumatized by ideology. They were traumatized by both fascism and communism. I know what that looks like. I know what it feels like. And I also know that some of it has gotten into my bones, because that's what trauma does. And so when I know that there are people listening or watching, reading something that I'm involved in, and I know that those people exist because I've seen them, not just in terms of my own family, but so many other families, and I know that they need someone to have empathy for them, to compassion for them, to understand them, to be aware of that. And they do respond. And there are many situations where people have stopped themselves from doing destructive things to others and to themselves. And I'm keenly aware of it because they contact me. That is worth more than money to me. Would I make much more money as a hate monger? Absolutely. Do I have the pipes, the delivery, the imagination to create the kind of vivid language that can create a lot of hate and clicks and coins? Of course. I choose not to do that path. And the reason for that, there's only one real reason for that. I can't do that to my ancestors. I can't do that to my late father. He's on my shoulder right now. And I'm never going to do anything that embarrasses him. And I'm never going to do anything that wouldn't make him feel my son. That's my son. For years we had a falling out because he didn't want me to be a radio guy. He wanted me to be a prosecutor. Specifically, he wanted me to be a war crimes prosecutor because war crimes wiped out most of his family. Wow. And he was told by his friends, lawyers, judges, other people, that I had all the tools to be a prosecutor and maybe even a war crimes prosecutor at The Hague. And so that was my father's dream. And so when I took what he thought of as the easy way out, telling stories on the radio, to him, that was the easy way out because my mom was a natural born storyteller and I have her DNA in me. And so here it is, I'm doing that. So to my father, he just didn't take that seriously. So for years, we didn't talk very much. But when he was in the throes of Alzheimer's and was talking hardly at all, one of the caregivers one day is visiting with my father to do what caregivers need to do for people suffering from dementia. God bless them all. And they're all immigrants, by the way. Okay. You wonder why I'm pro-immigration. You wonder why I get my back up about the right-wing nut jobs who hate on immigrants. Immigrants are helping our people with dementia and everything else in the various care homes right across this country. I can't love our immigrant population enough. And so one of the caregivers is doing what needs to be done for my dad, and my dad is listening to the radio, and it's me. We were doing a syndicated show at the time, and popped up in Montreal, and he would listen to it from beginning to end. Even when he was getting deeper into the Alzheimer's, he was just somehow still attached to that radio, and he wasn't talking very much at all. But he said to the caregiver, he pointed at his little Lloyd's radio, and he pointed, and he actually said a few words. He said, my son. That means everything to me. At some level, he knew that I was doing some things that he was proud of.
That is very powerful, because I work at a library, and I deal with a lot of people who have dementia, and they in moments of clarity they tell me that they often have one thing that they attach to that doesn't seem to be clouded, and your dad chose his son, and I find that to be beautiful.
Well, everyone watching or listening to this right now has a Mike Adler in their lives, and every one of you listening to me wants that person. Could be a father, it could be a brother, a sister, mother, a teacher. It doesn't matter. Someone who is your northern star, and it makes your life when you feel that you made them proud. There are very few people who will be proud of you for hating on people, for raging on them, for sending photos of blackface on your social media account. None of the people I'm talking to are going to be impressed with that or proud of you. You're wasting your time. But much more important than that, you are leaving yourself purposeless. Find a purpose to your life. Find a Mike Adler. Find your favorite sister, your mom, your grandmother, even if they're no longer with you. Find someone that you really respect, someone who had a strong moral compass, and walk in their footsteps. I don't want to do religion here on the show, because when you do religion, people almost always take it the wrong way. But there is an expression.
Say whatever you want. Go ahead.
But there is an expression in Christianity. I mean, I love Jesus, but I'm not a Christian. How is that for you?
I'm an atheist. It's okay. You can say
anything. I love great teachers, and he's one of the greatest teachers who has ever walked the face of this planet. And so Christians like to talk about walking the walk and walking the talk. And that's what I'm talking about right here. So whether it's Jesus Christ, or a member of your family, or someone who was your teacher, someone you really respected, walk in their path. And when you walk in their path, you'll never walk alone, and you'll never be alone. And if there's one message that I've had over the many years, I've done almost half a century of public communications, it's have a purpose in your life, have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and find somebody. And you don't have to find a big group, but find someone whose morality you really trust, and see if you can have them as your compass, as your northern star. See how close you can get to having their respect. If you do that, your life will be significantly less lonely. You will be less lost. You will feel more empowered, and you'll be smiling a lot more. You'll be happier. I don't know how I could possibly have a happy moment in my life if the only thing I was concerned with is clicks and dollars.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to disparage people who are good at it. You're good at getting clicks and raising money. God love you. but that's not the life that I want for myself, and that's not the life I want for 99.99% of the people who are with us right now.
Well, listen, I would say, and I think that you're probably really the humble part of you might be like, oh, you stop it. But I think to a lot of people, Charles Adler is Mike Adler. So I want to thank you for that, sir, and I want to thank you for joining us today on Blackballed.
Thank you so much.
You have a great night. What do you say? I've never spoken with Charles Adler. There's a lot of people that I've interviewed that I've talked to here and there over the years that they probably don't remember. Charles Adler's not one of them. This was oh, by the way, he had to unblock me. he unblocked me like 10 minutes before the show started. I was like, is it okay if you can you unblock me? You know, if I'll take full responsibility for why-ever you did it. I don't remember what it was that made him block me. I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. But I'm glad he didn't. That moved me. I wasn't expecting that at the end, and I'm really, really appreciative and grateful that that Charles Adler was able to come and share his thoughts like that with me. I'm pretty moved here. I hope you guys were too. Yeah, I hope he comes back because that was dope. I just want to remind everybody as well. Oh, I got goosebumps still. Thank you, Charles Adler, for giving me goosebumps. Tomorrow, this man will be here. He is one of the co-founders of Death Row Records. He once toured with Tupac and NWA and Snoop Dogg. And then he got in a car accident and was unable to, his voice was destroyed. And about 8 days ago, he went on stage for the first time in 30 years, and his name is the DOC. Again, one of the co-founders of Death Row Records. I can't wait. And my thanks again to Charles Adler. That was a dope interview. And it was all him. And I really appreciate that. And we will see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Black.